I woke up on a Tuesday morning in May to find construction equipment parked on my meadow, which was exactly the kind of nightmare I had been dreading since moving to Pinewood Estates in Boulder, Colorado 3 years ago. My name is Isaac Anderson, and I own a 5-acre property on the edge of this suburban development. When I bought the place, the meadow was the main selling point. It stretched behind my house, a gorgeous expanse of wildflowers and native grasses where deer would graze at dawn. The property line was clearly marked in my deed, and I had paid good money for every square foot of it. But there they were, 2 excavators and a concrete mixer, rumbling across my land at 7 in the morning. I grabbed my coffee, threw on jeans and boots, and stormed outside. A crew of 5 workers was already digging post holes in a neat grid pattern. My stomach dropped. "Hey," I shouted, jogging across the dew-soaked grass. "What the hell is going on here?" A burly foreman looked up from his clipboard. "Morning. We're putting in the new community picnic shelter. Should be done in about 2 weeks. "Not on my property, you're not," I said, my voice rising. "This is private land." He frowned and checked his paperwork. "Says here this is HOA common area, work order approved by the board. Your work order is wrong. This is my meadow. Check the property records." The foreman's expression shifted from confusion to concern. He pulled out his phone and made a call, stepping away from the noise. I stood there, heart pounding, watching workers continue to dig holes in my land like they owned the place. 10 minutes later, a silver Lexus pulled up the dirt access road. Out stepped Deborah Whitmore, president of the Pinewood Estates HOA, dressed in tennis whites even though our community didn't have courts. She was maybe 55, with that particular haircut that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager," and oversized sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I understand there's some confusion this morning." "No confusion, Deborah. You're building on my property without permission." She laughed, actually laughed, like I had told a joke. "The Architectural Review Committee approved this picnic shelter months ago. It's going in the designated common area adjacent to your property." Adjacent to or on top of? I pulled out my phone and opened the property survey I kept saved. "See this line? Everything south of it is mine. Your workers are a good 50 feet past it." Deborah barely glanced at my screen. "That survey must be outdated." "The HOA owns a buffer zone between all properties and the development perimeter." "No, it doesn't. I've got the title, the deed, and 3 years of property tax payments that say otherwise." Her smile tightened. "Well, I'm sure we can sort this out. But the workers are here today, and we've already paid the deposit. Let's let them continue, and we'll resolve any boundary disputes through proper channels." Proper channels? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want me to let you build an entire structure on my land while we argue about whether it's actually my land? It'll be much cheaper than stopping work and restarting," she said. "Think of the community, Isaac. Everyone will benefit from a nice covered picnic area." "Build it on actual HOA property then. This is the ideal location. It's flat, accessible, and central to the development, and also mine." The foreman had been listening to this exchange with growing unease. "Miss Whitmore, if there's a property dispute, we should probably halt construction until it's resolved." Deborah shot him a look that could freeze lava. "You're being paid to build, not to make legal judgments. Continue with the work order." I stepped directly in front of the nearest excavator. "If anyone digs another hole, I'm calling the sheriff." We stood there in a tense standoff, the morning sun climbing higher, the workers looking back and forth between us like spectators at a tennis match. Finally, Deborah sighed dramatically. "Fine. We'll pause for 24 hours while I review the paperwork. But Mr. Anderson, you're holding up a project that will benefit the entire community over a petty boundary quibble. It's not petty when it's my land. She left in a cloud of dust and indignation. The workers packed up, looking relieved to escape the drama. I spent the rest of the day taking photographs, measurements, and calling my real estate attorney. My lawyer, Patricia Chen, reviewed everything that afternoon. "Your documentation is solid," she said over the phone. "The meadow is definitely yours. The HOA has no claim to it whatsoever. So what do I do? I'll send them a cease and desist letter. If they ignore it, we can pursue an injunction. But honestly, most HOAs back down once they realize they're legally in the wrong." "You don't know Deborah Whitmore," Patricia laughed. "Oh, but I do. I've dealt with her type 100 times. She'll bluster and threaten, but when faced with actual legal consequences, she'll fold." I wish Patricia had been right. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of construction. They were back, all of them, plus additional workers. I ran outside in my pajamas to find concrete being poured for foundation pads. "Are you kidding me?" I shouted. The foreman wouldn't even make eye contact. "Orders from the HOA board. They said the legal issue was resolved." It absolutely was not. I called Patricia immediately. She was furious. "They're doing this deliberately. They know that once the structure is built, it becomes much more complicated legally. A judge might let them pay you damages rather than tear it down. So they're just going to steal my land. They're gambling that you'll eventually accept compensation or give up. It's a bullying tactic. What can we do right now, today? I'll file for an emergency injunction, but that'll take a few days minimum. In the meantime, all you can really do is document everything." So I documented. I took videos and photos from every angle. I measured the exact placement of each post hole, each concrete pad. I recorded the workers, the equipment, the timeline. And I watched helplessly as a large wooden structure began rising on my meadow. Within a week, the picnic shelter was framed out. It was actually quite nice, I had to admit, with heavy timber posts and a steep pitched roof designed to handle Colorado snow. There was space underneath for probably 6 picnic tables. Under different circumstances, I might have even liked it, but it was on my land, and I hadn't given permission. The injunction hearing was set for the following Monday. In the meantime, Deborah sent me a formal letter offering to buy a 1/4-acre strip of my meadow for $5,000. The shelter sat on about 1/8 of an acre, meaning she was offering to buy twice the space they'd actually used. Patricia advised me not to respond. At the hearing, Deborah showed up with the HOA's lawyer, a sleazy-looking guy named Richard Parson who specialized in property law. He argued that the HOA had acted in good faith based on their records, that the community benefit outweighed any boundary confusion, and that I was being unreasonably difficult about a minor encroachment. Patricia destroyed him. She had the original development plans, my deed, the survey, 3 years of tax records, and testimony from the surveyor who had originally mapped the property. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Sandra Mills, was not amused by the HOA's tactics. "Let me be clear," Judge Mills said, peering over her reading glasses. "Mr. Anderson's ownership of the meadow is indisputable. The HOA had no right to build on his property without permission. However, the structure is now substantially complete." My heart sank. "Therefore," she continued, "I'm ordering the HOA to either remove the structure within 30 days at their own expense, or negotiate a fair market value purchase of the affected land with Mr. Anderson. If no agreement is reached within 30 days, removal is mandatory. Additionally, the HOA will pay Mr. Anderson's legal fees to date. It was a partial victory, but I'd take it. Deborah looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Outside the courthouse, she cornered me. 5,000 is more than fair for that strip of land. The market value of a quarter acre in Pinewood Estates is closer to 40,000, I said. But I'm not selling. Don't be ridiculous. What are you going to do with a picnic shelter on your personal property? I smiled. An idea had been forming in my head for days. I guess I'll figure something out. Her eyes narrowed. The judge gave us 30 days to negotiate. Then you'd better be prepared to tear it down. Over the next week, Deborah tried everything. She sent board members to my door. She organized a petition among the other homeowners. She even had someone leave a basket of muffins on my porch with a note suggesting we be reasonable neighbors. I ignored it all. Instead, I hired a fencing company. A good one, with references and licenses and insurance. I had them survey the exact property line, and then I had them build an 8-foot privacy fence around the entire perimeter of my meadow. The picnic shelter ended up smack in the middle of it, completely enclosed, inaccessible to anyone except through my property. The fence was beautiful, too. Cedar boards, professionally installed, with lockable gates on the side closest to my house. It took 4 days to complete and cost me $12,000, but the look on Deborah's face when she saw it was priceless. She showed up while the fence crew was finishing the last section. "You can't do this," she sputtered. "It's my property. I can fence it if I want. But the picnic shelter is for the community." "No, the picnic shelter is on my private property. You built it there without permission, remember? This is outrageous. You're blocking access to an HOA amenity." "There is no HOA amenity on your property. There's a structure you illegally built on mine." She was practically vibrating with rage. "We'll sue you for this." "For what? Fencing my own land. Good luck with that." I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. The 30 days were almost up. The judge had been clear. They either needed my permission to keep the shelter there, or they needed to tear it down. And tearing down a structure they'd spent nearly $50,000 building was not something Deborah wanted to report to the HOA board or the homeowners. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "I told you. Market value for the land, plus damages for the unauthorized construction." "That's extortion." "No, that's compensation for the land you stole." She left in her Lexus, tires spitting gravel. That night, I was sitting on my back porch enjoying a beer when the idea really crystallized. The picnic shelter was nice. It was well built, attractive, functional. And it was now on my private, fenced property. People couldn't access it without coming through my land. I called my friend Marcus, who ran a small business consulting firm in Boulder. "Hypothetically," I said, "if someone built a recreational structure on my property without permission and I fenced it in, could I charge admission for people to use it?" Marcus laughed. "Is this about your HOA thing? Maybe. Dude, that's hilarious. But yeah, technically. It's your property, your structure now since they built it there. You could charge admission, rent it out, whatever. You'd need proper insurance and probably a business license, but it's doable." "You're serious?" "Completely. It'd be like running any other venue. You'd have liability insurance to cover users, charge whatever the market will bear and pay taxes on the income. Perfectly legal." I grinned into my beer. "Thanks, Marcus." The next day, I applied for a business license with Boulder County. I listed my business as Meadow View Events and Recreation. I got liability insurance that covered up to 50 people at a time on my property. I had a professional sign made for the gate. "Private property, Meadow View Picnic Area, admission $10 per person, reservations available." Then I put up an ad on Facebook and Craigslist offering a beautiful covered picnic area for rent. Perfect for birthday parties, family reunions, small gatherings, $10 per person for day use, or $200 to rent the whole shelter exclusively for up to 4 hours. The responses started immediately. A mom wanted to book a birthday party for her 8-year-old. A church group wanted space for a Sunday afternoon social. A couple wanted to host a casual wedding reception. Within 3 days, I had bookings for every weekend in June. I also printed flyers and put them in mailboxes around Pinewood Estates. Love that new picnic shelter. Now you can use it, just $10 per person. See you at Meadow View. Deborah showed up at my door the morning before my first booking, shaking with fury. "This is illegal," she shrieked. "You can't charge admission to an HOA amenity." "It's not an HOA amenity. It's a structure on my private property that I'm operating as a business. We built that shelter, without permission, on my land. According to Judge Mills, that makes it mine unless you remove it. You've got 3 days left, by the way. Want me to recommend a good demolition company? The homeowners will never stand for this. The homeowners are welcome to pay the admission fee like everyone else." She tried to escalate to the county, claiming I was running an illegal commercial operation in a residential zone. The county zoning officer came out, reviewed my business license and insurance, walked the property, and concluded that occasional event rental of a single structure on a 5-acre parcel fell within allowable agricultural and recreational use. No zoning violation. Deborah tried to claim I was violating HOA rules about home businesses. Patricia sent a letter reminding the HOA that the Meadow wasn't part of the HOA-governed lot. It was excess acreage outside the standard residential plot, and therefore not subject to their covenants. My first event was the 8-year-old's birthday party, 15 kids and 10 adults. I greeted them at the gate, collected $250 cash, and let them into the Meadow. The shelter was perfect for their needs. They brought decorations, food, and a piñata. The kids ran around in the open grass while the adults relaxed under the shelter. Everyone had a great time. As they were leaving, the mom hugged me. "This is such a perfect spot. Thank you. Come back anytime," I said. Word spread fast. By the second week, I had people coming from outside Pinewood Estates. The location was beautiful, the shelter was well constructed, and the price was reasonable. I was making about $300 to $500 per weekend, which more than covered the fence cost over time. But the best part was the Pinewood Estates residents who wanted to use it. The same neighbors who had signed Deborah's petition demanding I be reasonable now stood at my gate with $10 bills, asking if they could have a picnic. I was always polite and professional. "Of course. Welcome to Meadow View. Please remember to take all trash with you when you leave." Some people grumbled about paying. One guy, a middle-aged accountant named Gerald, actually argued with me. "This was supposed to be free for residents," he said. "It was never supposed to be on my property," I replied. "But since it is, and since I'm paying insurance and maintenance, there's a fee. The HOA paid for it. The HOA built an illegal structure on land they didn't own. If they'd built it on their own property, it would be free. But they didn't. Most people understood, even if they didn't like it. A few refused on principle and left in a huff, but plenty of residents paid up and enjoyed the shelter. Deborah, meanwhile, was having a meltdown. At the next HOA board meeting, which I attended as a homeowner, she faced serious questions about how this situation had happened. A resident named Tom stood up. "Let me get this straight. The HOA spent $50,000 on a picnic shelter that we can't use unless we pay Isaac Anderson." "It's a temporary situation," Deborah said tightly. "It's been 5 weeks. We're exploring legal options." "What legal options?" demanded another homeowner, a retired lawyer named Susan. The judge ruled against us. We built on his land. We either need to pay him for it or tear it down. Instead, we've done nothing, and now he's making money off our mistake. He's exploiting a technicality, Deborah snapped. Susan shook her head. No, he's using his property rights, which we violated. The board meeting devolved into chaos. Homeowners were angry about the wasted money, angry about the restricted access, and angry that Deborah hadn't resolved the situation. Several people called for her resignation. She held on to her position by promising to negotiate a final settlement with me within 2 weeks. This time, when Deborah and the HOA lawyer came to my door, their attitude was different, more subdued. "Let's talk realistically," Deborah said, sitting at my kitchen table. "What will it take for this to end?" "Market value for the land the shelter sits on, plus damages for the unauthorized construction." Richard Parson, the lawyer, opened his briefcase. "We had the land appraised. A quarter-acre at market rate is $40,000. We're prepared to offer that. And damages. We'll cover your legal fees, which are currently at $8,000, and an additional $10,000 for the inconvenience." I pretended to consider it. "That's $58,000 total." "Yes." "I want $75,000. Deborah's face flushed. "That's excessive. You built a $50,000 structure on my land without permission. You ignored a cease and desist. You forced me to go to court. You've caused me months of stress. And you did all of it deliberately, hoping I'd just give in. $75,000 is more than fair." "The board will never approve that." I shrugged. "Then I keep the shelter and keep charging admission. I've made $3,000 in the last month, and summer's just starting. I've got bookings through September. At this rate, I'll make $75,000 in about 2 years, and then it's pure profit." Richard Parson did the math in his head. "He's not wrong." Deborah looked like she wanted to flip the table, but she didn't have any leverage left. The judge had ruled against them. The community was furious, and every weekend, more people paid me to use the shelter the HOA had built. $65,000, she said. "Final offer." $75,000, and I throw in free access for Pinewood Estates residents going forward. No admission charge for anyone who lives here. That got her attention. "Free access?" "Yep. After you pay me, I'll keep running the shelter as a private venue for outside rentals. But any Pinewood resident can use it for free whenever it's not booked. I'll even set up an online calendar so people can check availability." Richard Parson leaned over and whispered something to Deborah. She listened, her expression calculating. $70,000, she said, "with the free resident access, and you agree not to pursue any further damages or legal action." I extended my hand. "Deal." We shook on it. Richard drafted a settlement agreement right there, and we all signed it. The HOA would pay me $70,000 in exchange for an easement allowing the shelter to remain on my property, with guaranteed access for Pinewood Estates residents and guests. I would maintain the structure and could rent it out commercially, but residents would always have free access when it wasn't booked. The check cleared a week later. $70,000 deposited directly into my account. I used $20,000 to pay off the fence and my legal fees. The other $50,000 went into investments, and I kept running Meadow View events and recreation. True to my word, I set up an online booking system. Residents could reserve the shelter for free. Outside groups paid the rental fee. I hired a local teenager to help with maintenance and setup. The business grew steadily, but the story didn't end there. About a month after the settlement, I started noticing problems. Graffiti appeared on the shelter walls. Someone smashed one of the picnic tables I'd installed. Trash was left everywhere after resident use, even though I'd put up signs and provided garbage cans. At first, I thought it was just typical vandalism. But then I caught a group of teenagers spray painting the support posts. When I confronted them, one kid said, "Deborah's mom said this place sucks and nobody should use it." Deborah was sabotaging my business. I installed security cameras, which I should have done from the start. Within a week, I had footage of Deborah herself sneaking onto the property late at night and dumping bags of garbage around the shelter. Another clip showed her son, a 20-something dropout named Kyle, spray painting profanities on the fence. I compiled the footage and sent it to the HOA board, along with a letter from Patricia outlining that this constituted harassment, trespassing, and property damage. The board held an emergency meeting. I attended with my laptop and showed everyone the videos. The room went silent as they watched Deborah, their HOA president, vandalizing my property in the dark. Tom stood up, his face red. "This is unacceptable. Deborah, you need to resign immediately." "This is taken out of context," she stammered. "What context?" Susan demanded. "We can see you throwing trash around and your son spray painting the fence. He's been making a mockery of this community," Deborah shouted, pointing at me. "Charging admission to something we built. Something you built illegally on his land," Tom shot back. "Then we paid him $70,000 to make it right. And now you're committing crimes because you're bitter about it." The board voted unanimously to remove Deborah as president. They also banned her from serving on any HOA committee for 5 years. Her son Kyle was issued a trespass warning for the entire Meadow View property. But I wasn't satisfied with just a resignation. The damage to my fence and shelter amounted to about $3,000 in repairs. The harassment had caused me to lose 2 paying bookings when clients saw the vandalism and canceled. I filed a police report and pressed charges against both Deborah and Kyle. The police took it seriously because I had clear video evidence. Deborah was charged with misdemeanor criminal mischief and trespassing. Kyle got the same charges, plus an additional count for the hate speech he'd spray painted. They both had to appear in court. Deborah hired an expensive lawyer who tried to argue that she'd been under emotional distress from the property dispute. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Amanda Torres, wasn't buying it. "Your client was upset about a legal settlement that her organization agreed to," Amanda said. "So she responded by committing crimes against the other party. That's not distress, Your Honor, that's retaliation." The judge agreed. Deborah was convicted and ordered to pay restitution for all damages, which came to $5,500 after accounting for lost business. She also got 60 hours of community service and a year of probation. Kyle, who had a prior record for vandalism, got a harsher sentence: 100 hours of community service, 2 years probation, and mandatory anger management classes. Watching them both get sentenced felt like genuine closure. After that, things settled down. The new HOA president, Susan, was reasonable and professional. She even sent a formal apology letter on behalf of the board, acknowledging the mess the previous administration had created. Meadow View events and recreation continued to grow. By the end of summer, I was booking corporate events and larger parties. I added string lights, upgraded the picnic tables, and planted wildflowers around the perimeter. The Meadow became a genuinely beautiful venue. Residents started to appreciate it too. Once Deborah was gone, the attitude shifted. People realized they had free access to a great space, and many took pride in it. Neighbors would stop by while I was doing maintenance and thank me for keeping it nice. I even had a few people apologize for signing Deborah's original petition. "We didn't know the full story," one neighbor said. "We just trusted that the HOA was in the right." "It's okay," I told him. "People make mistakes." By the following spring, Meadow View was generating about $2,000 a month in revenue from outside rentals. After expenses, I was clearing around $1,500 in profit. Not enough to quit my day job as a software engineer, but a nice supplement. More importantly, I turned a nightmare situation into something positive. The Meadow, which the HOA had tried to steal, was now a thriving community asset that I controlled. The picnic shelter they'd illegally built had become the centerpiece of a successful small business. And every time I walked out to that shelter, every time I saw families laughing and kids playing in my meadow, I felt a deep satisfaction. Not just because I'd won, but because I'd created something good out of something bad. One evening in April, almost exactly a year after the construction crews first showed up, I was locking up the meadow after a wedding reception when a car pulled up. I tensed, half expecting trouble, but it was Susan from the HOA board. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Sure." We walked over to the shelter and sat at one of the picnic tables. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I wanted to thank you," Susan said. "For what?" "For not giving up on this community. You had every right to be bitter to make things difficult. Instead, you found a way to make it work for everyone." I shrugged. "I just wanted what was fair." "It was more than fair. You could have demanded they tear down the shelter out of spite. You could have made the space completely private, but you didn't." "I like the community," I said. "I just didn't like being pushed around." "Well, you handled it better than most people would have." We sat there in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the light fade. "Deborah's moving, by the way," Susan said. "She and her husband bought a condo in Denver. I think the shame of everything was too much." "I hope she finds some peace," I said, and I meant it. I didn't want Deborah to suffer forever. I just wanted her to leave me alone. "Her replacement on the board is great," Susan continued. "And we've implemented new policies about property verification before any construction. This will never happen to anyone else." "That's good." Susan stood up. "Anyway, I just wanted to say that, and to let you know that most of us really do appreciate what you've built here." After she left, I sat there a while longer, enjoying the quiet. The meadow had been the reason I bought this property, and despite everything, it had become even more special than I'd imagined. The following months brought more growth. I added a small storage shed for supplies, improved the parking area, and started offering add-on services like table decorations and basic catering coordination through local vendors. By summer, I was busy enough to hire Marcus's teenage daughter as a part-time assistant. She handled bookings, cleaned up after events, and managed the online calendar. It freed up my time and gave her work experience and summer income. Resident use of the meadow also increased. Now that the drama was over, people felt comfortable enjoying the space. I'd often come home from work to find neighbors having impromptu picnics or kids playing in the open grass. It made the property feel alive in a way it hadn't before. I even started hosting free community events once a month. Movie nights with a projector and screen, ice cream socials, holiday gatherings. The meadow became a real gathering place for Pinewood Estates, which is what Deborah had claimed to want in the first place. The irony wasn't lost on me. In August, I got a letter from a regional magazine wanting to do a feature on Meadow View. They'd heard about the unique origin story and thought it would make an interesting article about property rights and creative problem solving. I agreed to the interview, which ran in the September issue under the headline "From Property Dispute to Community Asset: One Man's Battle with His HOA." The article was fair and accurate. It laid out what had happened, included comments from Susan and several residents, and featured photos of the meadow during various events. It even included a grudging comment from Deborah, who admitted she had handled things poorly, but maintained the HOA had acted with good intentions. The publicity brought even more business. I started getting calls from people across Colorado wanting to rent the space for events. I had to create a waiting list for peak weekends. By October, I was making enough profit to consider expansion. I consulted with Marcus about the business side and with an architect about possibilities. We explored adding a permanent bathroom facility, extending the covered area, maybe even adding a small stage for performances. But I decided against major changes. The Meadow's charm was its simplicity. It was a beautiful, natural space with a well-built shelter. That was enough. Instead, I invested in better maintenance and small quality improvements. Professional landscaping, upgraded lighting, more comfortable seating. I wanted people to have the best possible experience when they use the space. As fall turned to winter and bookings slowed down, I took time to reflect on the whole experience. It had been stressful, expensive, and infuriating at times. But it had also taught me important lessons about standing up for myself, about finding creative solutions to problems, and about the value of community. The Meadow survived its first winter as Meadow View events and recreation beautifully. The shelter handled heavy snow without issue, proving that whatever else could be said about the HOA's actions, they'd hired good contractors. I spent a few winter Saturdays cross-country skiing across the property, enjoying the peace and quiet. A few adventurous residents asked if they could do the same, and I said yes. The Meadow became an unofficial winter recreation spot for the neighborhood. When spring returned, I was ready for another busy season. The booking calendar filled up quickly with the usual mix of birthday parties, family reunions, corporate retreats, and weddings. But the best moment came in May, exactly 2 years after the construction crews first showed up. I was setting up for a wedding reception when Tom, the resident who'd been so vocal at the board meeting, approached with his wife. "We'd like to book the Meadow for our daughter's graduation party," he said, "but we wanted to pay the commercial rate, not use the resident discount." "Why?" I asked. "You live here, it's free for residents." "Because you've put so much work into this place," his wife said, "and because we were part of the problem at the beginning. We signed that petition without getting your side of the story. This is our way of making it right." I was touched. "You don't need to do that." "We want to," Tom insisted. "Plus, your assistant does such a great job with setup and coordination. It's worth the money." We booked their event for June, and they paid the full commercial rate. Several other residents did the same thing over the following months, insisting on paying even though they didn't have to. It was their way of saying thank you, and I appreciated it more than they knew. As the second summer at Meadow View rolled on, I realized I'd achieved something I never expected. I'd turned an HOA nightmare into a genuine success story. I defended my property rights, built a small business, and created something that benefited the entire community. The Meadow that the HOA tried to take had become more valuable and more loved than it ever would have been as a simple common area. One evening in late July, I was walking the fence line, checking for damage, when I noticed a family I didn't recognize having a picnic. I walked over to introduce myself. "Hi, I'm Isaac. Welcome to Meadow View." The dad stood up and shook my hand. "Thanks for having us. We're the new neighbors, just moved into the Johnson place last week. Welcome to Pinewood Estates. We heard all about this place," the mom said. "The whole story. It's kind of legendary around here." Their teenage son grinned. "You're the guy who made the HOA pay to use their own picnic shelter." "Something like that," I said, laughing. "It's brilliant," the dad said, "and the space is beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with the community." After they left, I sat on one of the picnic benches and looked around at what had become of my meadow. The wildflowers were in full bloom. The shelter stood strong and solid. String lights swayed gently in the evening breeze. It was perfect. Not perfect in the way the HOA had imagined, with their unauthorized plans and stolen land, but perfect in a better way, one that respected property rights and community simultaneously. I thought about Deborah sometimes, living in her Denver condo, probably still bitter about how things had turned out. I didn't hate her anymore. I felt something closer to pity. She'd been so focused on control, on having her way, that she destroyed her own reputation and cost her HOA tens of thousands of dollars. If she'd just respected my property rights from the beginning, if she'd asked permission or chosen a different location, none of it would have happened. The community could have had their free picnic shelter, and I could have kept my meadow pristine and private. Instead, we'd all been forced into a confrontation that changed everything. But in the end, I'd won. Not just legally, but practically. I had my land, my rights, my business, and the respect of my neighbors. The HOA had learned an expensive lesson about overreach and accountability. And the meadow, the beautiful 5-acre meadow that had started this whole mess, was more vibrant and valuable than ever. As darkness fell and the string lights flickered on automatically, I locked up the gate and walked back to my house. Inside, I poured myself a celebratory bourbon and raised the glass toward the window overlooking the meadow. To property rights, I said aloud, and to creative solutions. The next morning, I woke up to find an email from a couple wanting to book the meadow for their wedding in September. They'd seen the magazine article and driven out to see the space. They were willing to pay premium rates for an exclusive all-day rental. I confirmed the booking and added it to the calendar. Meadow View Events and Recreation was thriving, and I was finally at peace with everything that had happened. The HOA had built a picnic shelter on my meadow without permission, and I'd fenced it in and charged admission. It had been the right move, the only move that made sense, and in the process, I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success, community, and the satisfaction of knowing you stood your ground when it mattered most. The meadow was mine, the business was mine, and the future was bright. Everything had worked out exactly as it should.